Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, we'll give our shout outs. Nic and I talk about stand-up comedy. Then we interview Michelle Rau, a good friend of ours on the show and a friend to the show, about cool NEPA projects, keeping your career going despite having to move every 3 years, and her innate ability to annoy celebrities. And finally, 75% of the food we eat comes from 12 plants and 5 animals. Except for me, not 5 animals.
But yeah.
Despite estimates that there are over 80,000 edible plants on the planet.
Which is crazy. Yeah. It's just, I love that stat though. It's 12 plants we eat. And it's like, I don't know what I want for dinner.
Apples or potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Hit that music.
All right. Our shout out for today goes to Dawson's very own Hannah Kopolowski for helping us really crush our social media outreach. She's been fantastic at getting content out across all of our platforms. And honestly, we cannot thank her enough. Hannah, thank you so much for all that you've done for us on the show and at NAEP. Thank you. Speaking of NAEP, please be sure to register for NAEP's Coastal Resiliency webinar on August 26th at noon Eastern, where we will be discussing coastal and climate resiliency success stories. It's also moderated by me, so all the more reason to join. So head on over to naep.org/webinars-new for more information. If you would like to sponsor a future episode, head on over to environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and check out our sponsor form for details. Let's get to our segment.
Might just tell me some jokes and see if you can make me laugh.
Wait, it didn't. Yeah. No, I did do comedy festival a couple weeks ago. Yeah, like a week ago. And it was fun to get back out and make people laugh. That was great. It actually really was a really good set. And
this was in person?
Yeah, it was in person, at the comedy club down here in Raleigh. Good Nights.
Which is, what's that called? Good Nights?
Yeah, it's called Good Nights Comedy Club. And yeah, it's the main one, the big one around here. I mean, there's a Raleigh Improv and a few others, but like the comics like Good Nights, that's where we go. And so that's the big one you want to get on stage. That's the one where you want to, practice your material and do everything.
So wait, were you like an intro guy or was it like open mic?
No. It was a show. It was an actual show. Okay. It was actually technically a competition, but nice. The weird thing about it this year is like, it's like you're supposed to bring people, and I'm like, I'm not bringing anyone to this. Like, we're just gonna do this. And so like a bringer show is, if you basically go through if you bring enough people. And so that's the thing you have to remember with those kind of shows. So a lot of our starting comics will do things like, I'm funny enough where I don't have to bring anybody to get through. No, you do. You have to bring some people because the other comics are bringing people and they're voting for their person no matter what.
Right.
So,
right.
So really,
contest,
right. It is.
Voting things are.
Yeah. But it's so Good Nights only does that for round 1. But the reason they do that is because they want to see, do you have a draw? Do you have people that will come see you? And
nobody
that's
likes a comic with no friends.
Right. Which is ironic because that's most comics. But it was a lot of fun to do. You did a good set when like the audience and the comics both tell you did a good job. Like that's how you know. You're like, all right, yeah, I still got this. That's it. I'm funny. That's right. They both said it. Both groups. Two groups said it. But yeah, it was great. It was really fun. And
so like what? Okay, I don't know the life of a comic. So other than that movie that Sally Field made, which is a little dated. Maybe it's
that's dating yourself. Yeah.
How do you like prepare for this? Do you have written jokes and you've practiced them?
Yeah. Oh yeah. To the
like
cats.
Your wife is tired of hearing them.
Yeah. No, I'm smart enough to know that I shouldn't tell her. I gotta because it's the funniest thing. She does not like stand-up comedy at all. Like it's just not her thing. and so like if I tell her a joke, she's like, dead silence. I'm like, okay, right. You know what? It's just because you don't like comedy, not because it's not funny. She's like, okay, you say so. But so it's always to the cats. I mean, every comic has a different process, right? Mine is basically I have to write out the joke and then I have to go over it 1,000 times. And as I'm doing like the repeating of the joke, I realize, this will be a much funnier line. And this will be like, I had a joke about having too many cats. And it actually took me a long time to kind of put it together. Whereas instead of being like, basically the end of how the joke comes out now is like, my wife and I are expecting, and everyone's like, oh, that's great. Like our fourth cat. And then boom, like, oh God, that's that's not what I was expecting. And then I was like, no, I'm kidding. We already have 4 cats. And it's like, and then you make a face like I'm terrified of having that many cats. And so that's where the joke ends, right? But you have to get to that point. Like, how do I make that fun? It's more fun when people are surprised by things, right? So when you say expecting, you're like, oh, this is going to be about, kids. And then it turns out it's about cats instead. And how I'm, and so that's kind of like.
And then it goes back to Nic not having any friends again.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That was that's kind of the process for me, and other people do different things. I mean, it's a writing intensive thing. A lot of people have to write, and it's like kind of like trying to put together a puzzle, but you don't know where all the pieces are yet. You may not find the last piece for, months on a joke, and a joke's never done until it's recorded. So once you have it on CD, or whatever, CD, geez, what am I doing?
Now who's dating themselves?
Oh my God. Why did I say that? Once it's recorded and put on the internet, which is a new technology we have where it can be streamed anywhere. Yeah, that's when the joke is done. And then not until then. So like one of my comic friends just recorded an album at Good Nights maybe a month ago. And, he's working through it now, trying to clean it up and get it out to Sirius and a few other places where it's going to go on, and you'll be able to download it. It's super cool, really neat process. But, that's
nice. One day we'll be listening to Nic on a road trip.
Yeah, I got a lot more work to do. I've got I feel like I have like 5 good minutes, and yeah,
how many good minutes do you need to make a CD?
You need an hour. Well, CD is 45 minutes, 45 to an hour, depending on, geez, Nic. Yeah, you need about an hour, I think, hour and a half, depending. So for like an actual special. And some people can do it prolifically. They're really prolific writers. They can do that every year. And, that's just, it's a much bigger challenge. I will say there's a lot of ego in comedy. No. So most comics, I know, stunning. Most of them will tell you that they're basically, oh yeah, I've got 30 good minutes. They don't. They have 3 minutes. They have 3. And so this is where I know for sure, like, cause you do this comedy enough, you realize, oh yeah, this is a great joke, but the other jokes I have are just good. They're not great. And so that's just the way it is. You got to okay, I have to work on these more.
Yeah.
And you should be getting go ahead.
No, I cut you off. You go.
No, yeah. I was like 5 laughs a minute is what you're trying to go for. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's a lot of laughing.
That's the goal. Yeah.
So the best route is always to tell jokes about what you know, right? Is that
for
true?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So do you tell environmental and NEPA jokes?
Well, I have to. It's funny. I do, but I have to be very careful about the jokes that I tell, right? I can't tell jokes about clients. I can't tell jokes about agencies or the federal government. It's just not something that I'm interested in doing, even if there is material there. But when I retire, I'm telling you, all bets are off. You guys, you're watching that whenever I can. Yeah.
You're going to go from 5 minutes of material to 2 hours.
85. Yeah, no problem. I mean, there's some things.
Of course, by then we won't be recording on CDs or Wi-Fi or
back in my day, we had CDs.
Else.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be broadcasting to Mars.
We'll be on Mars. We'll be living there. It's EPR from Mars. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So speaking of, let's get talking to Michelle and her NASA job.
All right, cool. Hello, and welcome back to EPR. Today, we're really excited to have Michelle Rau on the show. She is a senior project manager with Jacobs and is also on the NAEP board. She serves as the NAEP Secretary and co-chair of our education committee. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do at Jacobs.
Okay. At Jacobs, I am the NEPA practice lead. We're such a global organization that we have environmental impact assessment as a global practice. I really focus on the U.S., which of course means NEPA. So that's my primary kind of role within Jacobs. But then I'm also a senior project manager, and I do a lot of projects within the space industry, which is kind of a unique little niche field I found for myself. But my projects usually involve like NASA, National Science Foundation, Department of Defense. And, generally I tend to work on the bigger, more controversial projects, environmental impact statements. But, every now and then I'll do other projects too.
Right.
That's awesome. I know a lot of people, including us, are dying to ask you some questions around that. But let's start with how you get started in your career, and then we'll end with where you are now.
Okay.
So how did you get started in environmental?
So how, getting into the environmental field, is really my grandmother. She was an environmentalist before environmentalism was cool. She was even a vegetarian. So,
Wow.
of the 1940s, as a vegetarian.
Neat.
And so, she always kind of led me down that path of being really interested in the environment. I can remember she would donate to Sierra Club and Greenpeace and all the big ones. And so, based off of that, I always kind of had an interest in environmental work. I went to college. I went to the University of Pittsburgh and I studied biology. At University of Pittsburgh, which was a top 5 medical school, you just automatically did pre-med. And I quickly realized that wasn't the route for me. So I moved on and I started to realize ecology was a really fascinating field. I used to love Nova PBS shows back in the day. So I was actually watching a Nova show on evolution. And I was like, this is really cool. And Pitt had a degree in ecology and evolution. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. After that, I just found a job that would actually pay me to do environmental field work in BLM in the Southern California desert. And then I got a job with the Army. And then from there, I started getting into consulting work and, kind of getting to what I do now.
Awesome. And so you've been at Jacobs for 12 years, thereabouts. And how have your roles changed?
About 13 years now.
13 years.
I was actually pregnant with my son when I started. It was CH2M Hill at the time.
Right.
And Jacobs bought CH2M.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We were over the hill by the time we got bought.
I love it. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. That's kind of a joke my clients used to tell me. I was like, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Never heard it before, right? Yeah.
So, and then when Jacobs bought CH2M, I was with the acquisition and moved over to there. So it's
gotcha. So
15 years I've been working in that paradigm.
Right. And how have your roles changed over time then? What was that transition like?
So when I first started with CH2M, I was brought in as an environmental planner. Prior to that, I kind of mentioned I was working for the Army. The Army has a program called the ITAM, Integrated Training Area Management. And then within that, there's another sub-program called Land Rehabilitation and Maintenance. I had started working there in Southern California. I was working in Fort Irwin. The reason why I got that job was because as I alluded to, I was working in the El Centro Desert for the Bureau of Land Management, which is right on the Mexican border. I mean, I moved from Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania weather, to the deep Mojave desert, 120 degrees the day I moved in.
Oh my gosh.
So I was working for the BLM in El Centro, and I had a job interview at Fort Irwin. And it was, a much bigger job than what I had. They wanted a master's degree. They wanted 10 years of experience. I had a bachelor's degree and 2 years of experience. And the way I got the job was they said, well, what makes you interested in this job? I go, well, it's a step up compared to El Centro, and, Barstow would be, a good opportunity. And they were like, oh my gosh, she wants to move to Barstow. They gave me the job and it worked out really well. I was there for about 3 years, and it was if you don't know, Fort Irwin is the U.S. Army's National Training Center. So every military unit across the country essentially has to go there and train at some point. And so they do these giant mock battles. So brigade versus brigade. It's the only place in the United States where 2 brigades can kind of train against each other. So I was out there and getting to see all that. And, it was just really amazing. And then the company I worked for was a really small company called Harris Corporation. And they won a contract in Fort Carson, Colorado. And when I found out they won the contract, I walked into my boss's office and I said, hey, can I work at Fort Carson? And he said, sure. So I got the same job title, but I moved from Fort Irwin to Colorado Springs, which is
Nice.
really beautiful, place
Gorgeous,
to live. So I lived there for a while. Then, not surprisingly, I married a soldier. So, and then from that point on, and once, what was really nice about consulting, it gave me the flexibility to live that military spouse lifestyle. So, we move every 2 years, 3 years. At that time, he was just a senior captain. And so we just needed to be prepared to go wherever. And lots of companies buying each other out. When I at Fort Carson, General Dynamics Information Technology, GDIT, I was working for them, although I never actually left a job. The companies just kept changing. You can kind of see that's kind of a theme. Like I just stay in the same place, the company moves around me. So I'm working for GDIT, and they, the one thing they're not going to do is fire me because I married a soldier. And so they let me become kind of a consultant. And I did that for a while. And then, the one thing in careers you can realize, especially when you start young in a field, like I said, I was pretty much out of college when I started working with these individuals. By the time I was kind of getting to that point, sometimes people don't see you past that 20-year-old brand new newbie. Right. Kind of at that 10-year point in my career, and realized, hey, maybe it's time for a change just so that I can be kind of seen as something else. And so I tried for a job at CH2M, and they hired me, and they were doing some environmental impact statements for the Army, and they figured I knew something about the Army. So I got brought into those. And then while I was working and doing those, we weren't quite doing as much Army and military work. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so that's when some of this NASA and space stuff started to kind of open up for me. And I started working on those projects.
That's awesome. It sounds like you have a great career history.
So far.
So much to go.
Right.
Also.
Yeah.
It seems like you've already done so much.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, you touched on a lot of different things, and I hear some things that I can tell that you were doing that moved yourself around in the career. But if you're speaking to somebody who's looking to get into a company like Jacobs or something, one of the larger firms, what kind of advice would you give them?
For me, as I kind of just pointed out, it was starting on that client side. So I was already working for the U.S. Army, and they, as I said, they weren't going to let go of me. So they put me kind of into the consulting role. The best consultants usually have a pretty good understanding of the clients that they're working with. So for me, and I work primarily in federal agency work, really understanding a certain client sector really helps a lot. And that's usually the best way to kind of get in. But also it's looking for where there's a need. So they needed somebody in El Centro, California. And I said, I'll go there. And then they needed somebody in Barstow, California. Hey, I'm excited. I'll do it. And then it's having that certain amount of enthusiasm and that excitement, kind of the doors start opening up for you. I got, just to talk a little bit of how I got into this space niche. It started out with, we got this opportunity primarily with the Department of Defense. We were working with Air Force Research Laboratory, and they needed to get some NEPA work done. And it was just a small little environmental assessment. If you work in the NEPA field, for a consultant, that's usually kind of a lower, less dollar figure, I don't want to say kind of project. And so I just raised my hand and said, yeah, absolutely, I'll work on that. And then, the next project kind of came along, and I kind of jumped at it. And then there was a DARPA project, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency project. And, I said, absolutely, I'll support people. I started out in supporting roles, and then I kind of moved into more and more project management. And what ends up happening is you volunteer yourself enough times that sooner or later you end up being that person in the slot. And then the next stage is you find that you're the person that gets to kind of choose whether or not, you want to do the work. So, I don't know if I just really got lucky with my career, but that's definitely how I saw it happen. It's as I said, raising your hand, showing that enthusiasm. Yes, I want to do this. And then, being willing to play that support role. I used to joke, I do laundry or carry bags if necessary.
Right. But it's honestly, it's a really good point. You're saying, two things really. One is, you were open to a location, right? Change. You weren't afraid to do that. And you're saying yes. You're saying yes to opportunities as they come up. And that's it's pretty straightforward, but it really worked out for you. And, like I say, I'm super excited to talk NASA with you. I'm glad that you brought it up. And, so you talked about how the process started, but what are you working on now? And maybe more importantly, how do you get me to Mars? That's really what I want to know. Can you do that for me? Right?
We're working on that technology right now. I'm actually talking to a few individuals outside of NASA about a big new project that essentially they're working on nuclear thermal propulsion in order to get people to Mars even quicker. So we're about 18 months, I think, to get to Mars. Now, like with this kind of propulsion, it could take as little as 3 months. It's kind of very early stage stuff. NASA's been doing, it sounds scary and, you have to be careful. Like, I want to emphasize the amount of safety analysis and the mitigations and the work that goes into place. I mean, you have some of the most educated and impressive PhDs trying to figure out, how risky this is. And there is a presidential directive that says you have to make sure you're safe to do these things. So NASA's been using nuclear technology since the 1960s and the Apollo missions. So they have a long history of doing it. And it was always for power or for heat. And now they're looking at doing it for, trying to get people and stuff farther and farther away. So it's interesting. We're kind of at that cusp of, what we're going to see next. And being able to do things like in the next 5 to 10 years, I think technology is really going to change. And so as part of that, how does NEPA, how does environmental planning fall into all of it?
I just wrote a question for Nic. I was like, I need to understand how environmental fits in here.
I love it. I love it. I'm looking right at it. That's so fun. Awesome.
So there's a National Environmental Policy Act, right? And under that, whenever there's a major federal action, the government either has to create an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. And as I kind of alluded to, an EA is a kind of smaller document and EIS is a much bigger document. And so the issues involved with this are really associated with what would happen if there's a launch mishap. I mean, we've all seen, these terrible things. Launch mishaps are generally in the 1% range of, any given launch. But so that's where the process comes in. So per this presidential directive and per NEPA, NASA, Department of Defense, whoever's sponsoring it, actually FAA, there's a lot of different ways that this can kind of come about. They have to do a environmental impact statement or an environmental assessment. And that's where I come in. I help them do that work. We have the public meetings. It's pretty crazy.
This is so cool, though. Oh, wow. We need to talk more. That's incredible.
Insanely exciting.
And it's good to hear that, too, because, one of the things is, too, when you work on these projects and you're doing them day in and day out, you get a really cool moment where you're like, I'm doing something really neat. And it's an honor just to be invited into the room and to hear these people speak and to learn how works. But, you get into the day and day. And it is kind of fun, like when I haven't talked to somebody and then, you talk to somebody and their eyes light up. You're like, oh, yeah, I get to cool job.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for sure.
That's really cool. So tell us about some of your field experiences. You listen to the show, so you know that we like to ask people what we call a field notes and hear some of our funny stories from the field or impactful moments or whatever. But there's one I know that you mentioned just a little bit about, and it involves you've got 2 incidences that involve some celebrities. So you have just your NASA and celebrities.
You're super,
Right. They kind of go hand in hand, to be honest.
Secretly cool. Yeah.
Secretly. Very secret, but it's not really true. But I'm going to go with that.
Right.
Yeah. So at one time you managed to piss off Spock. What's that all about?
Oh, so the National Science Foundation provides grants, but they also invest in major infrastructure projects. So some of the, very large telescopes you may have heard about, the Arecibo Observatory is one of them, the Green Bank Observatory, these massive arrays, the telescopes in Hawaii. National Science Foundation tends to be a major funder of a lot of those. One of the projects, I already said it, the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, is, it's a massive facility. And it's one of those ones that you don't really know about unless you either live in that area or you're really into radio astronomy. But it's actually the world's largest steerable structure. So it's the size of a football field. And it's a massive telescope, and they can turn it around based off of what area in the cosmos they want to study. And the Green Bank telescope, I'm pretty confident, was one of the telescopes used. If you heard about the black hole, that was just, a picture of a black hole and proof the existence of black hole. That this is like the kind of telescope that they use. But, so it's really cool in terms of science, but it's also cool in terms of architecture and, what they were able to accomplish. The project I was working on was an environmental impact statement, kind of considering NSF's activities and their funding of the telescope and, kind of what the future of the telescope might be. And we had a bunch of public meetings. And after the public meetings, I was with the director of astronomical sciences for NSF. So if you ever watch the movie Contact, I forget Jolie's father, I forget what role he was, but so he was one of the key players in Contact, not this guy, but so that was the role. And so we were talking afterwards, and that my counterparts at NSF, he invited us to go for a tour of the telescope. And here's a lesson too. Like in the beginning days, you're like, when a client, offers to take you on a tour, sometimes you think, well, do I have to catch a flight? Do I have to do something? One rule I've learned in my career is if a client offers you a site tour, the answer is yes.
Yes.
Do a flight, if you have to reschedule your wedding, whatever you have to do. The answer is yes. So he offers us a tour the next day, and we get to go. And I mean, it's just amazing because now I have the director of astronomical sciences for NSF, and I have the director of the observatory giving us this tour. And, the actual observatory, I think, goes up to 7 stories. And so we get to go to the very top. And so we walk through it. We really get to understand it. We come down to the bottom, and there's a film crew down there. And we're like, what's going on? So it turns out Zachary Quinto, I think is his name, the guy who's Spock. It would be hard to piss off the old Spock.
Right.
It would be hard to make the old Spock upset.
Right.
So he's standing down there, and you can see he's just annoyed. So he had to sit there and wait for us to get our tour before he was allowed to do his documentary on the Green Bank Observatory. And of course, you're there with a bunch of scientists, and we don't interact with celebrities very often. And we're all like, oh my gosh, it's there. And you can just see how annoyed he had to wait. And then he had all these people just gawking over him.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
One of those really weird moments. So an English celebrity just had to wait for me. I appreciate that.
That's awesome. So, actually, yeah. So you're saying we probably can't get him on the show? Is what?
You might be able to. He really likes space. He probably likes the environment. So just don't have me make that phone call.
Got it. Oh,
so,
great.
Michelle, if I was working your job, I don't think I would ever want to stop working. I think I would just be signing up for everything and anything and probably not keeping any hours to myself. Hopefully you are taking some breaks. So just wondering what kind of things you're doing when you're not working on the most awesome NEPA projects ever.
And there's something there too. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in projects. And I have worked for projects where it was a large scale EIS and it was very intense. It was very controversial. We had public meetings with hundreds of people and thousands of comments. And I was working 7 days a week. I was constantly on call. I just spent all of my energy. And there's a mindset of, well, if I just work a little bit harder, if I just give it a couple more hours, if I just do this, then it's going to be okay. And up to that point in my career, and I would say I was probably transitioning from that mid to more senior point in my career. And, I just kept thinking, if I just work harder, every time before I worked a little harder, it would be okay. And it didn't. And the project went on for 2 years, and it was, very intense. And, it did, it started wearing on me. It started wearing on my family. And, it was a really good lesson. And, I can't say if I saw somebody going through it, I would kind of tell my story and explain it. But unless you feel it, you don't really understand that. And so and it's also a blessing and a curse, right? So I went through that situation and the project did end up being successful, not because I worked extra hours on the weekends. It was, we did things and it worked out. So after that experience, I do make a priority that, I set boundaries. And, generally speaking, unless a project really needs me, if it's a proposal or something that's really time sensitive, I'll still work a little bit on the weekends. But, for the most part, I'm at 5:30, I turn it off. Like you might have noticed at NAEP calls sometimes because across time zones. I'm on the East Coast time, so I tend not to stay a lot for the happy hours and stuff like that because I want to be with my family and spend the time I can with them. And with that, I also, make sure I find ways to kind of relieve the stress associated that can happen with some of these projects. Because, while they're fun, and while really neat moments, and there's still moments of stress where, maybe the client isn't exactly happy with the turn of events. Maybe there's something completely unbeknownst to us that kind of comes out of the blue. And so, I definitely have my mechanisms. And most of that, I've already said it a few times, is hanging out with my family and spending times with them. We like to go golfing. That's kind of a new one. We used to live in Colorado, so it was skiing. But since we've moved Harrisburg, Florida. Now,
no skiing there. There's
no skiing. Actually, I think the closest skiing in Florida is in near Green Bank, West Virginia. Right there, see, I can hang out with. But so trying to do the outdoor activities, and then also just like reading and relaxing, and whenever I can get a good laugh in.
So you like to read sci-fi books. What are your favorites?
Well, and that kind of goes to like why I was so eager to, get into the space stuff. When that started happening, I've always been, I think I was a Star Wars girl back when Star Wars was like brand new. I've always loved kind of Star Wars, Star Trek, that kind of stuff. My dad did too. And so that was kind of a family thing with us. But so I've just been, some of it is just for research for work, right? Like when I got the meeting, I had to read Contact and find and sometimes it's, educational. But I picked up the book Stranger in a Strange Land, which is kind of a sci-fi. It's about a Martian.
That counts, right? Yeah.
I read that one like a long time ago in college and decided I need to pick it up again. So it's fun. It kind of reminds you like, okay, it's really cool to work in this industry.
Yeah. Laura, I already knew I liked her, but now it's confirmed. I'm just saying. That is really, really incredible. And
that's why we ask these questions,
Yeah.
Like
it's
now
so great to hear.
Listening can say like, oh, I've been interested in doing this, but I'm also a space nerd and I feel like I can connect with Michelle. So
there we go. Yeah. And
watch out for space nerds content.
Yeah, right. Like the after show of this is just going to be me asking Michelle 18 space questions. So
there you go. I'm going to know none of them.
But you also mentioned something I think is really, it applies to a lot of our listeners too. You're a military spouse, and you've moved around a ton since you were young, since you were a teenager, pretty much, I think. And so I know that's a challenge for careers, maybe less so now than before, but you've done a really great job with that. So I don't know if there's maybe some advice that you have for others in similar situations that you could share.
No, it's interesting you say that, how it was tough. Like, to be honest with you, it kind of felt natural to me. Every job kind of like led itself to the next one. So, again, it was taking those opportunities as they arose. So moving from California to Colorado, when you're younger without families, it tends to be much easier to do those kind of moves. And then with the military, again, I was in a fortunate position that I was being afforded an opportunity where it allowed for me to work remotely. So I was working remotely, I guess that would have been about 17 years ago. And so that was a kind of a new concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now, those of you who might be familiar with a military wife, especially an officer's wife, the women don't tend to work too much, or the wives don't tend to work. I say that, but then I had friends who were lawyers and who had
of course.
It wasn't, but there's kind of this
it's a mix. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mix, but it tends probably disproportionate to most of society.
Right.
And so, I got involved in doing like Officer Spouses Club and stuff like that. So, while I was working remotely and I, could do everything on the computer and I just spent my time in the office, I was also getting engaged in, the spouses clubs and the stuff like that, which, gave me that kind of interaction that I needed. And then after that, it just kind of became more and more normal. When I started working for CH2M, there was an office and that was fun. But, at some point with the work that I do, my teams are all remote. So we've been working remotely, for quite a long time. So when COVID hit, it was I don't even know if I noticed, other than the fact my son wasn't in school and I had to figure that out. But
Right.
kind of all worked out fine. So yeah, it was fortunate to be in an industry where it was so easy to just kind of go to that complete remote. When Jacobs bought CH2M, the culture was a little bit different, where Jacobs was much more office driven and the expectation was that you work in an office, where CH2M was kind of on the leading edge of that remote work kind of allowance. And so there was a little bit of justification that I had to do roughly a year before quarantine. And then
Yeah.
I told you, it's really not that hard.
Yeah, right.
So, again, count your blessings that we're in an industry that kind of allows itself and lends itself to that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, we're getting close to the end of our time. It goes by so fast.
It really does.
Is there anything else that you want to share, projects you have coming up, or just anything we didn't get to ask you that you'd like to talk about?
So, within the NAEP organization, we have a couple of initiatives that we're working on that are kind of exciting. One of the things we're doing is kind of building up our working groups. So, if those of you who are engaged with NAEP know we have Chuck Nicholson who does NEPA, but we're kind of have some other groups too. I know, Nic, you run one, and we're trying to start up an environmental justice group. So I'm working with my coworker, Emily Golick, and we're getting some good traction on that. We think that's probably one of the big issues in the industry right now. I mean, to call it issue is probably a gross understatement, but kind of in that as environmental planners, we're really going to have to watch for. So we're trying to set up a paradigm where we have individuals who are experts and individuals who want to learn more, an opportunity to kind of engage through the working group. So that's the one I'm kind of trying to spearhead a bit, but
that's great.
A few more. Nic, was this the one you did, the coastal resilience?
Yeah, coastal resiliency, water resources. Yeah, and we love to have more people involved in that. And yeah, it's great. There's a lot of new stuff coming up with that too. It's a really good thing.
Keeping our finger on that change and having avenues where people can talk and be like, "Whoa, what's happening?" And
yes, exactly.
That's what we're trying to do. So we'll see how those grow.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for plugging NAEP.
Yeah. Thank you for all you do for NAEP too. It's great. It's incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll see each other in person one of these days soon.
I know. It sounds like January.
Yeah, does it? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. If it has to be.
Soon. That would give me an excuse to leave Syracuse in the winter.
Yeah, there you go.
Last question. Where can people get in touch with you?
I have an active LinkedIn account. So anybody really interested, I can use that venue. Michelle Rau, Jacobs. I think it should come right up, and I'd be happy to connect that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been great talking to you today.
Yeah. Loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Thank you so much to Michelle for joining us today. It was really cool to hear about her projects with NASA. And I'm really excited for that free trip to Mars that you promised me. So I will follow up with her on that. And as always, please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And that's our show.
Bye.